Whether Trump wins or loses the presidential election, he has gained many more votes overall than 2016. Does this show that his message resonates more than ever with the American people?
Lisa.
I guess I'm up.
I was just, well, you will be up in a minute, Jan, or you can kick us off if you like. You're chomping at the bit. Let's hear from you.
Well, yes. The thing is that the pollster said that there was going to be a blue wave and we were going to lose seats. Instead, the support for Trump has gone, we call it going down ballot, and it has had a wide impact.
Right, yes, he's certainly, I mean, Lisa, it's a very fair point that Jan makes in that the polls were showing that Biden was going to win reasonably easily. That's not happening at the moment. We still don't know who's going to win, of course. But Trump has increased. More people have voted for Trump this time than they did last time.
Yeah, I think what this has shown is that America is a very deeply divided country. The 2016 election revealed huge divisions in American society, and my impression from the turnout figures, Joe Biden is on course to win more votes than any presidential candidate in history, but Donald Trump has also increased the number of votes that he's got. The impression that I get from the results that are filtering in is that those divisions now are deeper than they were 4 years ago. It's been a very, very difficult time in American politics.
And what does that say about the appeal of the left in America?
Well, I think what it says is that we've had a president over the last 4 years who has sought to stoke division rather than calm those tensions. And we've seen a lot of that sort of politics, that populist style of politics, seeping over here to the United Kingdom. Don't forget, of course, that Joe Biden once famously described Boris Johnson as a political and emotional clone of Donald Trump. And we've seen those attempts by this government as well to stoke those tensions, to start culture wars. And we've had a very, very angry, divided debate over Brexit.
But the thing is, Trump has appealed to people.
Well,
there's no getting away from that.
It's easier to win votes by stirring people up against one another than it is to calm this situation. And I think what this tells us is that if Joe Biden wins, as he's expected but not guaranteed to do, then he is going to have a very, very difficult job on his hands, because he has to unite the American people and hold them together through what is widely expected to be the worst global economic downturn in a century. That is a huge challenge, and that is why I said this week that Britain has to really step up now, repair those relationships with the Democrats, who are seriously concerned about some of the actions of the British government recently, and play our part in helping to make sure that we do pull together. The Director General of the World Health Organization said recently that the biggest challenge that we now face globally is not the virus itself, but the lack of solidarity at both global and local level. So there is a huge amount of work to do, and Britain has to play its full part.
So, Rose McGowan, the question is, does the fact that Donald Trump has gained more votes than he did in 2016 show that his message resonates with more of the American people?
I think it's a little more complicated than that. It's not, you know, what I used to be a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm kind of in a no man's land. But I grew up in a very unusual way in Italy in what they call a cult. And what I've seen now on both sides is just that. You know, one side thinks the other's a cult, the other side thinks the other's a cult. And the answer is that it's both. The answer is that the New York Times, if there might be more erudite, you know, and telling you that Hillary's going to win, so everyone's shocked. But it's not really reality. And the thing is that with the cancel culture thing on the left, which I've been a victim of, I've been canceled many times. But the thing of it is that just by not saying bad words or just by thinking a certain way doesn't make it that you've actually accomplished anything. You know, the party line when I was a Democrat that I was always fed was we could accomplish so much if the Republicans wouldn't stop us. Now, I was a lobbyist in DC. I saw behind the scenes. A lot of them, they're incredibly similar and they're incredibly tight, the left and the right. Donald Trump is his message is just, you know, this isn't working. He doesn't do it well. He doesn't speak well, in my estimation. But he's appealing to people that are tired of being lied to. Now, he's lies as well. So it's very confusing. But in a weird way, he's a very transparent liar. When he does lie, we can see it. Whereas the other ones, they hide it much better. And I don't think it's as easy as we need to join hands and sing Kumbaya. There's a lot going down in the U.S. And it's frankly This is a weird opinion, but it needs to happen, and it's very sad. But this is, two sides have been lied to for so long that it's very hard to see the truth anymore.
Some hands up amongst our audience. Alex.
I was going to agree there with Rose. I think it's very easy to win votes when you are not held to account for what you're saying. I mean, we've seen even in the past 24 hours, Trump and his party claiming to have won elections that they haven't. And there don't seem to be any consequences for that. And I think, again, that's seeping into British politics, where people aren't held to account for what they say. There doesn't seem to be any regulation of people's claims in the past. So it's easy to win votes when you just say what people want to hear and then never have to follow up on them.
Gedminter?
Exactly the same point as Alex. I think there's just so much misinformation out there, and we are not all starting at the same base with the same truth. People have so much news from social media, and we don't know what's truth and what's lies. So I think it's just really important to regulate, again, what Alex said, so people are not allowed to say kind of lies and things like, world beating test and trace system when it's not.
And Simon, I mean, when you talk to people who support Trump, obviously, as Jan does, many will say, well, that's patronising to us. We know what we're voting for, we know what we're hearing, and we like it. Don't tell us that we're just being taken in. And clearly, we don't know how this election is yet going to turn out, but what certainly has not happened is that Biden is not romping home and Trump is not being beaten into a corner.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know a huge amount about what the people in America are thinking, and Lisa seems to be far more connected to the entire American nation than I am. But it does amaze me that Trump has done so well. And I think the question we've got to ask is really about the political class in America, and potentially about our own political class. Because we have to remember that Trump isn't a career politician. He came from outside politics. How has he managed to break into this world and become president? And the answer, I think, comes down to the lack of connection between the political class and what people are thinking. And part of that, I think, is that we have moved into a world where people just aren't prepared to speak their mind. There's just this lack of authenticity.
Well, you can't say that of Donald Trump, surely. I mean, that's right. One thing he does do.
No, that's exactly right. And I think that is the only way I can explain his success, is that he, love him or hate him, and I have to say I would not vote for him, but he is authentic. He is speaking from the heart. He is speaking his mind. He doesn't care what he says. He doesn't care about the consequences. And I think that overly cautious approach that political classes around the world are beginning to take, and the sort of half answers that they are forced to give, means that people like Trump can suddenly break through because they're prepared to speak their mind. And I think it has to be a wake-up call to our own political class to say, come on, speak your mind, stop following the party line, stop just saying what you think you want us to hear, tell us what you really think.
Well, we'll be coming to you for that, Oliver, in a minute. Tom?
I broadly agree with what Simon said there, but I think what we should be looking at is Trump's messaging has been all around. He's the protector of the American people. He's America first. He's a protector of the economy. He's there for the average American. But I think what's happened is he's connected a lot of those things with fear. The things he says around the fact that if Biden wins, there'll be riots, and pitting different groups against each other, such as immigrants, and portraying them as threats, and generally acting like a bully and being really divisive. But I think what concerns me more is the fact that how easy is that division to unpick. Even if Trump loses and Biden wins, are we ever going to get back to a point in America where there's less division and a much better point?
Natalie?
I was going to say, I think with Trump, he's, I mean, I'm no fan, but I think he's very clever. He's a charismatic character. He knows his audience really, really well. He knows how to deliver that message that's going to land with them. And he's got a lot of loyal supporters. So I'm really not surprised that a lot of people have really turned out to vote for him this time.
So, Hannah, the question is whether Trump wins or loses. At the moment, he's not looking on track to win, but we still don't know. Does the fact that he's attracted more votes show that his message still resonates with the American people?
So, I mean, I certainly think that when you're sitting on this side of the Atlantic, it is extremely surprising that tens of millions of people could possibly vote for Trump. I mean, that's certainly, I've got some basic expectations from a president, you know, don't make fun of disabled people, don't, you know, solicit foreign interventions, that kind of thing. I mean, it's really surprising, I accept that. But I think that wondering why voters in America didn't make the right choice, as it were, is kind of the wrong question.
Well, that wasn't the question.
But,
That isn't the question.
No, I mean more as in the fact that people are surprised, it sort of implies that we're wondering why people didn't make a different decision. And I think that in a way that's not the right way to think about things, because essentially, you know, you've got all these people who are overlooking concerns on, you know, sexual assaults or concerns on I mean, basically playing fast and loose with the Constitution and still choosing him. And I think that...
Why do you think they are?
Well, I think it's not about whether people couldn't be persuaded. I think it's about people not feeling like they're represented. And I think there are a lot of people in America who are very deeply unhappy. There's lots of studies that show this. There's a study that demonstrates that well-being in America has been declining for 25 years, particularly in prime-age white men who have lower educational outcomes. I mean, there are things like, you know, the opioid deaths, suicides, alcohol use. All of that is in this group of people who are also Trump voters. And I think unless you get to the core of what it is that people are unhappy about and why they don't feel like they're being represented, I think that's the only way that you'll really answer why Trump is so appealing.
I mean, obviously, that's not all Trump voters, I'm sure.
No.
Jan would say. Ricky?
Yeah. Yes, thanks. Just going off what Tom's just said, I think if Joe Biden does win, that's more than just his first term, if he goes for a second term, of rebuilding, really looking at what a society does. We have to look after each other. And the divide and conquer, or the division, we've had too much of that. How can we work for each other? I put a face mask on to protect someone else, not just for myself. The other point I just wanted to raise was there's an interesting piece on Newsnight last night about polling, and how actually many people lie to pollsters about who they actually are going to vote for. And I wonder whether there's something similar here. Are people open with their political views? And if not, why not?
Abby?
Thanks, Fiona. I mean, my sense is that it's not necessarily that his message resonates with people, that Trump's message resonates. It's more coming back to the point that I think Simon made before around the authenticity and the transparency that Trump conveys to some people. I think people are fed up of just hearing, you know, the party line and hearing politicians come out with very rehearsed and very scripted communications. And what they're looking for is that transparency and that openness, that perception of openness, at least. And where Trump is on Twitter all of the time, he gives them that sense of transparency, and that's really what engenders their trust. And to me, I think that that's actually more compelling to people than his actual message.
Don't forget, though, this is a fairly unique thing that may be about to happen in America. There have only been 3 occasions in presidential election history where the sitting president has not won a second term of office. So this would be a big move by the American people. I think there is a danger in this debate that we give far too much credence to the idea that this would be, in some senses, a victory for Donald Trump. It would be an almost unique moment in American history.
Well, we've heard 2 people now talk about how compelling openness and transparency and authenticity is from our politicians, which is obviously cue. We haven't yet heard from you, Oliver. So I want to hear from you. So we don't have to. We know we don't want any party lines tonight. Absolutely. So a Trump win would be better for the government, wouldn't it?
No, not at all. I mean, we in the UK have worked with presidents from both perspectives. I've seen it myself, and when I first started,
I know, but at least you've met
for
Donald.
David Cameron.
At least the government has. At least Boris Johnson has met Donald Trump.
Well,
even
David
spoke
Cameron
to Joe
worked
Biden.
very effectively with Barack Obama for many years, and Theresa May, and indeed Boris Johnson have worked very well with President Trump. And I've certainly given up as a politician trying to predict elections in this country, let alone in the United States. But I think one thing is a real cause for celebration is the fact that the greatest nation in the world in terms of its military power, its economic power, is deciding its fate, not like most of the rest of the world. It's not being decided by a political elite. It's not being decided by the army. It's being decided by the people of America. And I think
so. What do you think about
thing.
the fact that Donald Trump is trying to, depending on your point of view, some would say interfere, some would say correct the results coming in from the election? So he's talked about fraud, he talked about corruption, and he's got legal suits going in a number of states.
Well, we're well used to this happening in the United States, and it's happened. You remember?
No, we are not. Well, no, what we're not used to. No, hang on. We are not used to a sitting president is saying that the electoral system is fraudulent and corrupt.
Well, I think
I can't think of a time.
If we go back to the 2000 election, there was similarly it ended up in the courts. But it
wasn't about fraud or corruption.
But what is enduring about the United States, and indeed this country, is that our nations are built on these democratic values. And in fact, this weekend, as we look to the armistice, those are the values we've shared. That's the values we've fought and died for. And I'm absolutely sure that the US Constitution can withstand either the continuation or the change of president, depending on what the American people decide.
Jan, since you're being good enough to join us for this part of the debate this evening, I just wonder what your response is, or what your view is of President Trump's comments about fraud and corruption in the electoral system.
Well, there are a couple of points that I'd like to make. Trump, the people that didn't vote for Trump in the last election and voted for him in this election was because he delivered on every promise he made. I have friends who can't stand to listen to him, and they don't, but they vote for him. And
he hasn't quite delivered on every promise. I mean, the Mexicans haven't paid for the wall, have they, as far as I'm aware?
Oh. Well, you know.
Everyone apart from that one, then.
Yeah. But on really critical. And for 30 years, actually, I would even say 40 years, we have had a very divisive nation. And I don't believe that Biden's going to be able to pull it together. But where Trump made a mistake is that with COVID, people were exhausted. People were hurting. And so he didn't show enough empathy to reach out for those people to join him. And I agree that sometimes I just want to say, could you keep your mouth shut? But he knows what he's doing.
You've got your hand up.
Thank you. Let's say it's a typical Trump thing. He's completely divisive. This is what he always does. During the first debate, you saw him just interrupting Biden constantly. And this is him yet again doing his things. And to say that people are voting for him more now than before, it's just because those Republicans who didn't vote last time are now scared about Biden. That's the only reason the votes have gone up. Nothing to do with what he's done. It's not these policies. So it's a fallacy.
It is.
Sorry.
Jan, sorry.
It is a policy. You know, to make that kind of blanket assumption, we ended up having in the different rallies, we registered Democrats who were going to vote for him. So it's not just the Republicans. And the fear on the Democrat side was because Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez were so vocal and have an incredible following, there was a fear that we were going to go really far left. But what came out was that they really do believe that Biden is more moderate, and the blue wave didn't happen, and they ended up losing in the House and in the Senate. But it really made a statement that the voters want us to come together more, because we have got to get back to being moderate.
Rose.
I think what people maybe don't quite get is that America's not a democracy. It's an oligarchy. It's run by corporations. And as many Democrats and as many Republicans have been presidents, really in the last 30 to 40 years, it's gone like on high in that direction. You know, yes, do the Democrats hear what people want? Yes. Do they do it? No, because it's been proven and studied that only if it's something that the corporations want as well, then it'll happen. But if it's people that want it, there's other people to blame. And what I continually hear is Trump bashing. It's very easy to bash him. I'm not saying I don't, but I'm saying in this moment, you know, you're talking about credibly accused of sexual assault. That's been really kept out of the headlines with Joe Biden. And there's people that are just, it's not
Which he's
just about
denied,
sexual
of course, I
assault.
have
It's
to
about
say.
corruption on both sides. Of course, alleged. It's corruption on both sides. It's not just one, it's that one has better optics. And that would be the Democrats.
Rebecca.
Hi there. I'd like to come back to something I think Lisa mentioned, that this isn't a victory for Trump. But at the same time, it's clearly not a victory for Biden outright at the moment either. And I think that's something that's really important from this election. I think it enables us to look a little bit into the future. Many of the same cultural issues that are affecting the US, we see in our own electorate. And what's clearly the case is that these approaches, these more centrist, these more sort of just being the kind of anti-Trump and just being less extreme isn't cutting through. So I think there's something that needs to be thought through from our opposition parties about how they can actually deal with some of these issues and bring people together.
Caroline.
I was going to go back to Jan's point about the coronavirus and ask that, do you think Trump's attitude towards the virus has potentially put Americans off voting for him if the vote does go more towards Biden?
Well, I think, Jan, that's what you're saying, isn't it? Is that that's something that has perhaps cost Trump?
It did cost Trump. There were many of his supporters who voted for him that, because in press conferences, he was up front saying, I need to be a cheerleader. I don't want the people to get in panic. But he didn't come out with any sensitivity. And I'll tell you the other thing that really has bothered me is that in his rallies of the last few days before we voted, he was using himself as, look how quickly I got over COVID because we have remdesivir. And that doesn't make people feel that he's focusing on getting things done, because he keeps talking about the vaccine. But he's not saying anything about the people that have lost people, and the fact that 1 month Fauci was telling us no masks, then next month masks are good. And he's the president, so he's getting the blame. But if I could also add, I don't know if you have this perspective that it's not just Trump that has his lawyers going, because Biden had his lawyers going to try to get voter ID off, no signature needed.
No, we've seen that there are legal. The legal cases have been brought on both sides. There is only one person who's accused the electoral system of fraud and corruption, which is Donald Trump, which is the reason I mentioned it. I think we could talk about the election sometime. We don't have the result. I thought we might get it tonight. It doesn't look like we're going to. Maybe we'll wake up tomorrow and we'll have the result. So I'm going to move on to another topic. But for now, Jan, I just want to thank you for joining us and give us your perspective on this. It's obviously very interesting to hear what you had to say. Thank you very much indeed.